The legend of Tahoma National Park is one soaked in blood and terror, a tale that clings to the very trees like a curse. It is whispered among the park rangers, never spoken too loudly, for fear that the Wendigo might hear. The reports began as a trickle. Campers and hikers spoke of strange howls that rose with the wind, an eerie, mournful wailing that seemed to stalk them through the woods. Others reported a figure, something tall and gaunt, its skin stretched too tight over bones that seemed wrong, like a shattered puzzle pieced together by a madman. Most dismissed these claims as wild imaginations. But soon people started to vanish. Ranger Bennett, seasoned and hardened from years in the wilderness, was sent to investigate. He took with him two others, Rangers Malone and Fields, and they ventured into the deeper, untouched parts of the forest. 3 days later, Bennett stumbled out of the woods alone, drenched in sweat and blood that wasn't his eyes vacant, filled with horrors no one could pull from his lips. What happened out there, only Bennett knew. But the search team that went after him found the remnants of his crew, and what they found was enough to burn itself into their nightmares forever. Fields's body had been strung up between two trees, his chest cavity ripped open, ribs spread wide like grotesque wings. His intestines were yanked from his body, hanging from the branches like obscene decorations. The sight was bad enough, but it was his face that haunted the investigators the most. His eyes were missing, hollow pits staring up at the sky, while his mouth had been stretched open and stuffed with his own severed fingers. Malone's body was worse, much worse. His body had been skinned, the flesh peeled from his bones in thin, meticulous strips. What remained was a bloody, glistening carcass, left to rot on a bed of moss. His face was untouched, twisted into a permanent mask of terror, his lips pulled back in a grin that spoke of madness. But his legs had been snapped backward, folded beneath him in a way that made no sense. There were bite marks, deep, jagged gashes up and down his femurs. The bone splintered, like it had been gnawed at, chewed down to the marrow. Yet no one could find the footprints of any predator in the area. It wasn't until Bennett spoke, late one night, long after the investigation had been quietly shut down, that the true horror of what they faced came to light. His voice trembled as he recounted the game. They had seen the Wendigo the second night, a fleeting shadow at first, barely there, just at the edge of their vision. They heard it too, a soft, scraping sound, like claws dragging along bark, following them everywhere they went. Every time they stopped, it was there, watching, waiting. Then the whispers began. At first they were distant, carried on the wind, indistinguishable from the rustling of leaves. But soon the whispers grew louder, forming words, dark, guttural phrases that twisted their thoughts, sending tendrils of fear burrowing into their minds. The creature didn't attack, not at first. It toyed with them, stalked them, let them glimpse its monstrous form, always out of reach, just enough to drive them mad with terror. "It didn't want us to run," Bennett muttered. "It wanted us to break." Malone had been the first to snap. Driven by days of sleepless nights and the constant sound of those whispers, he had begun talking to himself, answering the voices that called his name from the shadows. When he finally walked off into the woods, they didn't stop him. By then, they knew there was nothing they could do. They heard his screams the next morning. It was Field's turn next. He had tried to climb a tree, hoping to get away from whatever haunted them on the ground, but that's where the Wendigo found him. Bennett had heard the cracking of bones before the screams, a sickening, crunching sound as the thing tore him from the tree like a doll and played with him, twisting his limbs into unnatural positions, as though curious to see how far the human body could bend before it broke. And through it all, the Wendigo never fed. No, this wasn't about hunger. This was about the game, the hunt. It thrived on the fear, the madness, the slow unraveling of its prey. Bennett had been the last. He could feel its breath on his neck, smell the stench of rot and death clinging to its emaciated body, but it didn't touch him. It wanted him to see, to understand. And in that moment, he had. The Wendigo didn't need to eat flesh to survive. It feasted on the fear, the insanity it wove into the minds of its victims. That was its sustenance. The final, bloody kill was just the climax, a brutal ending to a nightmare already in motion. Bennett vanished a month later, leaving nothing but a trail of blood leading deep into the woods. Some say he returned to the Wendigo willingly, drawn back by the madness that still lingered in his mind. Others believe the creature finally came to finish the game it had started. Today, when the full moon rises over Tahoma National Park, the rangers know better than to go looking for the source of the howls. They know the truth. Those who play the Wendigo's game never come back. Some hunts are never meant to end. Thank you for listening. We hope you've enjoyed the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell button, and we'll notify you when the next story comes out.